Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
This episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast with Jonathan Byrd, PGA Tour Pro, 2002 PGA Tour Rookie of the Year, is brought to you by Compassion International. For $38 a month, you can release a child from poverty. Go to compassion.com/sportsspectrum. Food, education, medical care, and vocational training, all done in the name of Jesus. Go to compassion.com/sportsspectrum and sponsor a child today. Jonathan Byrd is our guest here on the podcast today. The PGA Tour Pro, was a First Team All-America in 1999 and a graduate of Clemson University, the first four-time First Team All-ACC player in Clemson history. He was the 2002 PGA Tour Rookie of the Year, just a couple years after turning pro in 2000, and he won the 2017 Web.com Tour Championship. He's got 5 PGA Tour wins to his credit, 2 Web.com wins as well, and once finished tied for 8th at the Masters in 2003 and tied for 15th at the U.S. Open in 2003 as well. He's played in all the majors, the British Open as well as the PGA Championship. And it was fun getting to know Jonathan, getting to talk a little golf with him, as well as hearing his journey of faith. And there's some good nuggets here. So get a notebook out, maybe get your phone out, get the notes section out in your phone and take some notes, because he's got some really good, just practical advice. And there's something that he talks about towards the end called struggling well, which I wrote down in my prep and really enjoyed hearing about from him. We also get a great story of playing with Tom Watson and Vijay Singh and Jack Nicklaus, and really just a cool moment there playing with some legends in the game of golf. Here's our conversation with Jonathan Byrd, PGA Tour Pro, here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to talk.
How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jonathan. Thanks for being here on the podcast. And let's start with Clemson. Last month, late or early January, I should say, Clemson wins the national championship, beating Alabama. And we're talking here pretty fresh off of that game. Just tell me what that was like to watch that game and see your being a Clemson alum and seeing your team go all the way and win the national championship in college football.
Well, it was a very exciting season. We have, my wife and I have 3 kids, 12 years old, 10 years old, and 6 years old. And my wife went to Clemson. I went to Clemson. We graduated the same year. So it's always special to get to go back to Clemson for football games. And our whole family is Clemson fans. So even our new dog we got for Christmas, Clemson bandana. So it's fun to be able to root for the one team and not be a divided home. And the last, say, 4 or 5 years, it's been fun being a Clemson fan. Got a lot of wins and ACC championships and one natty. And then this year, I feel like the team just kind of kept gaining momentum throughout the year and playing better and better. And watching Trevor Lawrence, our freshman quarterback, it's just fun watching them play. They're so aggressive and they just kind of positive. They look like they have a lot of fun and they kind of get after it. And it's fun watching them. To be able to beat Alabama in such a big game and in the fashion in which they did it, giving God the glory the whole time. It's fun to be a Clemson fan.
Absolutely. And I wonder just your thoughts on Dabo and him coming to the program, turning it around, obviously, Coach Dabo Swinney. And being open about his faith. We posted something on Sports Spectrum the morning after they won the national title on January 8th about his faith and just being intentional but never forceful in who Christ is in his life and how he did that on the biggest stage last night post-game. Tell me about Dabo.
Well, he's been just really impressive, the whole time. When he got the job as an interim coach, talk about a guy who was prepared for the opportunity when he got his opportunity. I just hear stories about how he was just charting. If he was the head coach, this is how he would run a program. And when he got the opportunity, he really started putting those things in place. And And it really sounds like, from my perspective, he's just a guy who just has great vision. He has great belief. He's super aggressive. He knows what he wants to see. He knows who they are, who he is. He's very grounded and just where he comes from, and he just doesn't apologize for it. And I just think that's, on a national scene, that's come across to be very real, very transparent, and very attractive, because the guy and his team has so much fun doing what they love to do, but they don't apologize for wanting to win and wanting to be great. He's just got a lot of good lines, but I think the thing that, as me as a fan and also as an athlete, I just love to watch his belief. He's so contagious on just wanting to have big goals and big visions and believe and what they can do as a program and what they can do individually, and they just get after it, and it's just fun to watch. It inspires me to want to set bigger goals, because they've set some big goals and they've accomplished them. He said that after they won the national championship, he said, we're going to be here, but we're going to be here again. We're going to win another one. And dang, they just did it again.
Yeah. And I love when I remember when he said it in 2017, he told his guys, don't let this be the biggest and greatest moment of your life. Meaning there's so much more to live for than just playing football and, sports. And I wonder, for you, share with us a little bit about your journey, maybe to Clemson, and your journey of faith and living for more than just being, a golfer.
Yeah, Dabo, I remember, just not to digress, but he's just like in that last national championship game, he said, let the light in you shine greater than the light shining on you in that moment. And he's big about loving each other and team aspect and loving others and, serving others. And he really has a servant-minded mindset for his players. He wants to prepare them for life and, just not just their bodies, but their minds and their hearts. So for me, I went to Clemson. I graduated. I graduated in 2000. I grew up in a very solid Christian home. I was exposed to the gospel many, many times over, and I prayed to receive Christ when I was in middle school. So I had just kind of moments, where I felt like I was growing in my faith. But as I kind of got later on in high school, I kind of sidelined my faith. I kind of put it on the shelf. I had other things I was interested in, and I was excited about going to college to play golf and just kind of get the full college experience. And when I got to Clemson, it was I didn't go to church. I wasn't seeking out anyone to grow in my faith. I was just kind of taking it all in and just trying to have the best experiences I could. And after about a year and a half at Clemson, I was doing great as a sophomore on the Clemson golf team. I was an All-American. I was making good grades. I was having a lot of fun at school, but was just kind of empty. I just felt like I'm missing it somehow. I kind of feel like I'm doing everything I wanted to accomplish, but I'm missing it. And it wasn't until about midway through my sophomore year where I really felt like God was running me down and pursuing me. And I felt like I had all the answers in my head of what it meant to be a Christian and have a personal relationship with Christ, but I was missing it in my heart. And that's where I made a decision just to really turn around a God that was pursuing me and turn around to Him and just say, Lord, I want you to not just be the Lord of my mind, that I believe you in my heart, and you be Lord of my life, and started to pursue a relationship with Christ. And I'm going long here, but
that's okay.
FCA, I started to get the first thing I started to get involved in to try to, to grow was that Clemson has a very large FCA ministry, and I saw signs all over campus. You meet on, I think it was Thursday nights at 9:19, and I went to one of those, and thousands of college students. And I went a year and a half thinking there's not many Christians on campus, to seeing like, man, there's tons of kids running after Christ in college, and started to see an attractive people living out their Christian walk, and it was attractive, and they were having fun. And I just started to hang out with people and start to kind of pursue this relationship with Christ.
When you were golfing at Clemson, obviously you had a lot of success. First team All-ACC 4 times, the first one in Clemson history to do that as a golfer. First team All-American in '99, and then turning pro, PGA Tour, turning pro the next year, and then PGA Tour Rookie of the Year in 2002. As your golf game started to evolve and you started to play on bigger stages, tell me how your faith played a role in that, because of that decision that you made when you were in college.
I would be lying if I didn't say that my faith is. I feel like there's been a lot of stumbling, and I've one of my buddies has a saying, to struggle well, and I really feel like I've been able to continue to grow in my relationship with Christ and knowledge of Him. But there's been a lot of stumbles along the way in college, and, I didn't have really anybody disciple me a whole lot in college. So there were periods of growth, but there were also periods of just kind of, temptation, and didn't have a lot of Christians on my team. So as I kind of got through the end of college, I still experienced success with my golf game. But I was still kind of trying to figure out how I could grow and how I could glorify God, and with my golf and with school and, the platform I had in college, and then pursue, as I turned professional. But it wasn't until I turned professional in 2000, I met some guys through a ministry, a College Golf Fellowship, a non-denominational ministry to college golfers that does conferences at tour players' houses. And I went to Paul Stankowski's house. I was just out of college, and it's a ministry where now they have probably 10 or 12 of these conferences a year in the summer and winter. And, we've done one at Davis's house. Ben Crane's done one at his house. We've got a lot of young guys who are doing them now, Webb Simpson, and there are probably 40 college guys packed in Paul Stankowski's house, and a guy named Tommy Nelson taught. And for 3 days or so, we just, had fun, loved on each other, and just kind of grew. And that impacted me in a big way. And some of the staff I became really good friends with, and these guys started discipling me. And I also had another older gentleman through Search Ministries who did the Bible study on the PGA Tour start discipling me. And that's really where I started to grow a lot in my faith. I had success in golf, but I was also about to get married, and I just had a lot of questions because just traveling, about to get married, trying to grow in my faith and pursue the Lord. And I really couldn't have done that without some really solid men in my life to seek counsel, and to just for them to kind of guide me in getting in the Word, and also be able to communicate the gospel, because I started to have opportunities to where I could speak to people and share my faith. And I think that was really important for me, looking back, to have some men who helped me communicate the gospel well, because I didn't want to get up on stage and do a poor job of representing Christ.
That's a real fear for a lot of people, I think, is sharing their faith, and especially as your platform increases, sharing your faith on bigger stages. We talked about Dabo earlier, being ready and aware and intentional about sharing his faith on the biggest stage after they won it all. How was that for you as you first started speaking and your platform started increasing and you started playing in these big tournaments like the Masters and the U.S. Open? Tell me about how important that became for you, and maybe the struggles early on of being able to not just communicate your faith, but to share your faith, to share what God had done in your life?
Well, I really have, I have a lot of respect for people like Dabo. I feel like he's, when guys would share their faith and just, it felt very automated or to just say, I want to thank my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
Right.
It felt like that's what all Christians said, and it's like what you should say. And I just had a desire to be a little more real, maybe a little more transparent. I feel like Dabo does a great job of thanking God for the opportunity that he gets to experience this moment and to give God the glory, because I just feel like it's real. It's not like I don't feel like it's like he's just saying what somebody told him to say. That makes his faith look more real and more personal. And so I've had a desire to do that. I feel like I've done a decent job of that. I remember I won the John Deere Classic in '07, and I got the microphone in my face after I won, and I just missed 4 cuts coming into that week. And I just said I want to thank the Lord for giving me peace, because I've just missed 4 straight cuts, and God gave me great peace during that time to keep working and keep grinding. And then he gave me peace today as I was trying to win a golf tournament. And I've just had a great desire to be transparent. And when I've spoken, I want to be transparent that, I struggle. Professional athletes don't have it all figured out. It's, there's times when we win, and that's awesome, but there's a lot of periods of struggle where you're just trying to, figure out your game and make cuts and just kind of get by to get through those rough patches. And I think it's really important for us to be able to share those times as well.
Jonathan Byrd is our guest, the PGA Tour Pro on the Sports Spectrum podcast. Let me ask you about golf and maybe share a story with us of that first tournament that you played in, and even maybe the first one that you had a win in and victorious. I know you mentioned the John Deere Classic, but I always think it's fun to hear about, your first game, your first hit, your first touchdown, about that first professional tournament that you played in and just what that was like for you. Can you remember that?
I do. Actually the first professional event I played in at college, I actually got to play in a web.com event. And that was meaningful. But I mean, you're wanting to play on the PGA Tour, that's what you dream about. I got to go to my first Masters. I think I was in 6th or 7th grade. That was a meaningful time because that's where I captured the dream of playing professional golf and how fun that could be. And then my first tour event was in 2000. Right after I turned pro, I did a Monday qualifier and qualified for the Michelob Championship. And I made the cut. I got to play on the weekend and made, I think, a $35,000 check, which at the time was just huge for me, just to kind of be able to, take the edge off, to have some money to keep playing golf. I've made some bigger checks since then, but there's in the beginning, to make a check like that, just to have some cushion from an expenses standpoint was huge. But just getting to play with some tour players and practice rounds at that tournament, and some caddies. I remember caddies just making fun of me because of the gear I had. I had my first professional bag. They accidentally misspelled my name, and I had a brush on my bag to clean my clubs, and caddies were like, oh, "You can't do that out here. You gotta use a tee to clean your grooves. You can't use a brush." You just felt like such a rookie, And there weren't that many young guys out there when I first came out, so you were definitely the minority. Like today, I mean, it's just the tour is filled with 21-year-olds and 22-year-olds, and I mean, to be 24 on the PGA Tour isn't that big a deal anymore. But when I first came out, there weren't that many guys who were 22. So it was more, I feel like it was a little more intimidating. But my first year on the PGA Tour, just a couple quick stories. I won second to last tournament of this season, the Buick Challenge. My season didn't get off the best start. I made the first 2 cuts, and then I missed 7 of 8 cuts my rookie year. So I went through a period of time where I was just like, I would be on the cut line with one hole to play and know I had to make par and I'd make bogey and just blow it, or just have a bad Friday and just, it got mental. And I was really struggling, and I got to the Greensboro tournament, Greensboro Classic, and last hole I was like on the cut on the number, and I hit this wood into a par 5, and it actually hit a cop in the leg.
Oh, jeez.
And I got a good bounce and ended up making birdie and made the cut like on the number. And then I played an unbelievable round on Saturday and Sunday, ended up finishing third in the tournament, and that really turned my year around. I got to play with Tom Watson my rookie year on a Saturday round at Colonial. That was a great experience. And then the next week, I was the last guy in the field on a Wednesday at the Memorial Tournament, Jack Nicklaus's tournament. So I fly up in the early afternoon on a Wednesday to try to see if I can get around the course and see the golf course. And I looked at the tee sheet right before I went out to play my practice round, and I got Scott Hoke's spot because he withdrew, and I got paired with Vijay Singh and Jack Nicklaus.
Oof. That's pretty good.
So needless to say, I played the course in about 2 hours, ran around, really nervous, but got to play with Jack Nicklaus at his home tournament. And then, so that was a great experience. But, I mean, you want to win on the PGA Tour. My first win on the PGA Tour was at the Buick Challenge, the second last term of the year. I was in contention. I had kept my card. I went out on Sunday like 2 shots back, made a couple good birdies early, hit a bad tee shot on the 7th hole, and actually hit my fiance and got a good bounce. I mean, it's a crazy story. Not many fans. I was on a par 5. I got a good bounce off her shoulder blade, knock it on the green to 2, make birdie, and end up having a 5-hole stretch in the back 9 of eagle, birdie, 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 eagle. Shot 63 to win my first tour event. Wow. And I went from just keeping my card to winning to finishing 39th on the money list, which got me in the Masters. We got married in the off season, Christmas, first tournament was in Maui at the Mercedes Championship. So we had a really fun start to our marriage and great start to my second year on the PGA Tour. So just awesome memories.
I love that. I mean, you could tell stories all day long, too, which is such a great thing. Having played for so many years, I got to ask you just simply the Masters coming up here in April. What is that like to play at the Masters? You finished, I think, tied for 8th in 2003 there and have played it. What's that like to play in Augusta at the Masters?
I mean, for me, as a Southern boy, I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina, so really an hour and a half down the road. So that was the closest PGA Tour stop to my house. I mean, I grew up going to, we went to the MCI Heritage down at Hilton Head. That's what it was called back then. Yeah. And I got to see some tour players, Payne Stewart, Greg Norman, Davis Love, and those guys. But the Masters was just on a whole nother level. And so my second year on tour in 2003 was my first Masters, and it's just such a unique tournament. I kind of tell people it's like when I'm taking my kids to Disney World, like when you see their faces and you see that place, it's such a machine, like how they run Disney World and how manic it is. And you see your kids' faces. Like for a golfer, the Augusta National is Disney World. I mean, it's just everything's on overload. It's just the golf course is so manicured, so beautiful. You've watched it all these years on television. You have all these great memories. And like that first time you get to play after you're in the tournament, I mean, you spend the whole day going, oh, this is where Larry Mize chipped in. This is where Tiger chipped in. And I mean, your first practice round takes you like 6 hours because you're just so excited to be out there hitting. You have such a memory catalog of all these great champions hitting all these shots around the golf course. And I think that's part of the reason it makes it so special. It's played the same course every year. And I mean, it's the greatest tournament on earth. The British Open a very close second, but the Masters is just so special.
Let me ask you, as we wind down here, Jonathan, a couple questions going back into the faith world a little bit. And adversity, I think, is a word I like to talk to a lot of people about here on the podcast. Everybody faces adversity. Certainly as a golfer, you mentioned, missing 7 out of 8 cuts or whatever it was you said. I mean, that's adversity on the course. And then there's adversity off the course and just in life. And we all deal with tough times and difficult moments where our faith is tested. Can you share maybe a time where you had to rely on your faith to help you get through some adversity? Could be on the course or even more away from the course in your personal life.
Well, I've definitely had periods of time where I've struggled with my game. None more than, say, some of the last, 5 or 6 years. Like, I've lost my card, and I think it was 2014 or 15, and had to go back to the web.com tour. And those were really difficult times. You're just not sure, like, if you still got it, if you can continue to play. So some of those things are extremely challenging. I'm still kind of going through a period of time where I don't have full status on the PGA Tour. I'm trying to get back to having full status. Feel like I can still win out there, and so that's definitely adversity. But probably the most difficult time for myself and my family was, my dad's passing and illness. We were actually at a Clemson football game in 2007, and my dad and brother just got back from the Pub Links, U.S. Pub Links. He caddied for my brother, and we were at a Clemson football game, and we had a son who was 1 year old, Jackson, and I came back at halftime to pick up my dad and mom, and my dad had a seizure outside the stadium, and they rushed him to the hospital, and they found a plum-sized tumor in his brain, and within 5 hours, we find out my dad has stage 4 cancer, brain tumor. He's going to need to get operated, and the next day they told us the life expectancy was a year. So that really rocked our family. Just as a young man trying to figure out life and his career, and just got married, having kids, like, you just always assume your dad's always going to be there. And the reality of that his life was, he only had so much to live outside a miracle from God. We believed in that. We prayed for that. And my dad, fought hard for about a year and a half. He made about a year and a half. His tumor came back, and then it was just really hard from there. My dad passed away in 2009, July 7th, 2009. And so that was some major adversity, like golf. I remember playing at the Memorial during that period of time, and I played because I wanted my dad to be able to watch, and he wanted me to be playing, but I just was numb on the golf course. Golf just didn't seem very important at that time. But I really feel like God was teaching us some lessons, obviously dependence about Him, that this life is not all there is, and just to trust Him through the adverse times. I feel like I grew a lot in my faith, and my family grew a lot in their faith, and God saw us through it. We got to see a God, who promises to never leave us and never forsake us, and He never did, and He gave us peace during a very difficult time. So if God can do that during that period of time, He can do that with any difficult situation, any adversity anybody's facing. Our God is big enough, and He loves us and cares for us, and we can trust Him. Ultimately, we can trust Him because He gave His Son for us, and He died on the cross for us, to glorify God and to give us the opportunity to spend eternity with Him. So because of that, we can trust Him with any situation.
John,
our family looks back on that period of time, and we're grateful for what God taught us. It was very painful, though.
Jonathan, and thank you for sharing that. I know that's sometimes not easy to share. As we close here, and we have a question that we ask all of our guests on the podcast, you kind of mentioned that the Lord taught you some lessons during that period of time, and that's 9, almost 10 years ago now. What is He teaching you today? What is He teaching you in 2019 in this phase of life where you are? as a husband, a dad, a golfer, where God has you right now? What are you learning from him?
Well, I think some of the things I'm learning, I've struggled in the area of prayer life, my own prayer life, and I'm still learning dependence upon him. I'm still, when I get to speak to a lot of people, I talk a lot about identity, not placing our identity, not in, as men, it's really hard to separate who we are from what we do. I'm more than just a professional golfer. And I speak on that, and it sounds, really easy, but it's hard to apply it. I very often find my identity in my score or my top tens, or how I'm performing, or finding my identity in my children, or in my marriage, or who I am in the community. And there's so many things we can find our identity in, but ultimately the only thing that matters, the only thing that is like a firm foundation, is to find our identity in Christ and what he says about us, that I am holy and blameless, and I am loved by the Heavenly Father. And when I place my identity in that, I'm very secure in who I am, and it doesn't depend on how I perform. So I think he's always teaching me that, but he's teaching me to depend on him in prayer. He's teaching me just to keep trusting him, to keep, believing, to keep setting high dreams. And he's also just teaching me how to be a better husband, to love my wife well and to love my kids well, because it's just this age, it's easy to get distracted, to get passive as a man. I want to continue to be intentional with my time and work hard. So he's definitely teaching me that, and I'm struggling well, but I'm still growing, so I'm thankful.
I love that line, struggling well. And I actually wrote it down on my prep here. I'm going to write it in my journal, and I think I'm going to steal that and bring it to the men that I spend time with, because I just think it's so right on with us as human beings, and especially as men, that we are going to struggle. But at least if we're struggling in the right direction, failing forward is another thing you hear a lot in offices and businesses. I think that's the same kind of thing, struggling well. So, Jonathan Byrd, thanks so much for being here on the podcast. It's been great to talk to you, to get to know you, and hopefully we'll catch up again soon.
Yes, sir. Thanks for your time. I enjoyed it.
And many thanks to Jonathan Byrd, 5-time PGA Tour winner, for joining us here on the Sports Spectrum podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at JByrdPGA, the letter J, BYRD, PGA on Twitter. Many thanks to Jonathan for joining us here. We thank you for listening. We thank Compassion International for sponsoring this podcast. $38 a month, releasing a child from poverty. That's what it's all about with Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. The website's compassion.com/sportspectrum. Compassion.com/sportspectrum. Food, education, medical care, vocational training. Over 150,000 children choosing to follow Christ alone in the last year. 1.8 million children in 25 countries being helped by the great work at Compassion International. Go to compassion.com/sportspectrum. Sponsor a child today. Thanks for listening. Check us out on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all the social medias. Just search Sports Spectrum. You'll find us there. All kinds of stories on the intersection of sports and faith. Of course, subscribe to this podcast everywhere podcasts are found. iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, everywhere podcasts are found. And all of our content is over at sportspectrum.com, where you can become a member of our family by subscribing to our quarterly magazine. It's a great deal, just $18 for the Sports Spectrum magazine. Become a member. Partner with us, $18, a great tool to hand out, whether it's at a men's ministry or a church function or a school event. Sports Spectrum magazine, the cornerstone, the foundation of this ministry is the Sports Spectrum magazine, and you can subscribe today for just $18 over at sportspectrum.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time for a brand new episode of the Sports Spectrum podcast. Have a great rest of your day.